I'm knocked on the board so wide, in a suit standing tall with pride, here to learn and here to grow, in the light of his knowledge's glow.
Stories that I heard so clear, lived in my mind year after year. To the UT Kirkpatrick, here I stand, ready now to shake his hand. Oh, tutor's door, open wide, show me more. Oh, wisdom's call, I'm here to learn to stand tall. Books lined up on every wall, echoing a distant call. In his eyes I saw the spark, guiding me through learning's arc. Outside in the morning light, future bright, I'm feeling right. Kirkpatrick's home where dreams begin, a world of knowledge, let me in. Oh, tutor's door, open wide, show me more. Oh, wisdom's call, I'm here to learn to stand tall. Oh, tutor's door, open wide, show me more. Oh, wisdom's call, I'm here to learn to stand tall. Books lined up on every wall, echoing a distant call. In his eyes I saw the spark, guiding me through learning's arc. Outside in the morning light, future bright, I'm feeling right. Kirkpatrick's home where dreams begin, a world of knowledge, let me in. Whoa, tutor's door, open wide, show me more. Whoa, wisdom's call, I'm here to learn to stand tall. Whoa, tutor's door, open wide, show me more. Whoa, wisdom's call, I'm here to learn to stand tall. Show me more. Whoa, wisdom's call, I'm here to learn to stand tall.
I'm knocked on the board so wide, in a suit standing tall with pride, here to learn and here to grow.
Good morning or good evening, whatever time of day it is for you. I will pick up on the next letter from C.S. Lewis. This one is to his father. This is June 1914. Lewis is right around 15 or 16 years old. He's writing from his boarding school in England to his father back in Ireland. He does not like his school. He wants to get out of there. And so he and his dad have plans at the end of the term that he's in to move him over to a tutor that his father reveres and had studied under as a boy as well and is now friends with as an adult, named W.T. Kirkpatrick. We'll get more into that in just a bit. My dear Pappy, on Friday I got a letter from you for the first time since this trouble. I'm glad I was to get it. It has been a bad business, but I am glad to see that you are over the worst of it now. His father had apparently injured his arm. We talked about that last time, or I talked about that last time. Be careful of yourself and take care that you don't go back to your ordinary routine until you are thoroughly fit. My mental picture of home is disturbed to a certain extent by your mention of a fire. Here we are in the middle of a magnificent summer. Day succeeds day with the same cloudless sky and parched earth, and the nights are hot and comfortless. But on the whole, fine weather is agreeable and has, I think, a certain effect on the spirits. Thank you very much for the money, which will enable the firm to live en prince until the time of our exile be over, and I return to a lovelier country to lead a happier life. On the Tuesday of this week, an unusual thing happened. Smoogie asked myself and another boy in the same form and house, by name Cooper, to motor over with him to a little place called Birchwood in the country, where we had tea at an inn, and took a long, delightful walk through fields and woods to a place where we were again picked up by the car, and thus home again. It was indeed very kind of the old man, as I am sure he sees quite enough of us in school hours. We went through a very beautiful piece of country far, far away to the northwest of the hills, where we could never one second. Let me start that one over. It was indeed very kind of the old man, as I am sure he sees quite enough of us in school hours. We went through a very beautiful piece of country, far, far away to the northwest of the hills, where we could never go in an ordinary walk. To me, tired as I was of the flat, plain, and ugly hills of Malvern, this region, with its long masses of rolling hills and valleys, variegated by close, mysterious woods and cornfields, together with one or two streams, was an enchanted ground. The Malvern Hills loomed as a dark mass not far off the horizon. Seen at this distance, they had lost their shape, their sharpness of outline, and looked weird and unreal, but very beautiful. Here, in the middle of all this, we came upon the little college which used to be the summer resort of Elgar, the composer, formerly an intimate friend of Smoogie's. This is Sir Edward Elgar, it says here in the footnotes, lived 1857 to 1934. He was a composer who rose to an international fame about 1900 through his choral and orchestral music. He was living in Worcester at this time. The latter told us that Elgar used to say he was able to read a musical score in his hand and hear in his mind not only the main theme of the music, but also the different instruments and all the side currents of sound. What a wonderful state of mind! This week I have taken a course of A.C. Benson's essays, which have impressed me very favorably indeed. Do you know them? He has a clear, simple, but melodious style. Second, as I think only to Ruskin, and the matter is always suggestive, weighty, and original, he always makes you think, which a book ought to. Your loving son, Jack. Next letter to his father, June 7th, 1914. My dear Pappy, I was glad to get your letter on Saturday as I was beginning to grow somewhat anxious about you. I am glad indeed to hear that you are on the mend, and hope that the term mending will soon be out of place. So the report has come at last. Though I could have wished for something more effusive, still it is pleasing to note that it is an improvement on the last one, and I hope that the next in its turn will be a proportionate advance. Yes, I think the old man has some regard for me, but it must be remembered that even if I were to return next winter, I should no longer be under him, as all our form are getting a shove to make way for the influx of new scholarship people. This week I have enjoyed the doubtful privilege of having 2 teeth extracted, both of which had been bothering me a good deal off, and on this term. The dentist, who is a thoroughly competent official, pronounced his verdict that as they had been tinkered with over and over again and were now hopelessly rotten, they had better come out. So out they came, with gas, and I think it was a good job. I am at present engaged in reading Newman's poems. Do you know them at all? This is John Henry Newman. Verses on Various Occasions, published 1868. They are very, very delicate and pretty, and are like nothing more than one of those valuable painted Chinese vases, with which a touch would destroy. I must accept from this criticism the dream of Gerontius, which is very strongly written. That is Newman's Dream of Gerontius, which depicts the journey of the soul to God at the hour of death. In 1900, it was set to music by Elgar, who regarded the work as his masterpiece. Lewis came to like the dream very much in later life, and in a discussion of purgatory in chapter 20 of Letters to Malcolm, published 1964, Lewis said, "The right view returns magnificently in Newman's dream." Interesting. Back to his letter, but the rest are almost too delicate for my taste. It is a kind of beauty that I can't very much appreciate. We've had 2 thunderstorms this week, and their combined efforts have left the ground pretty much underwater, which is a great relief as it puts an end to that eternal cricket. Lewis does not like the sports that go on around the college and how much attention is paid to them. I wonder which is the more fatiguing, being made to play oneself or watching others play it. We have plenty of both here, and both are compulsory. Maybe he just hates it because he's being forced to participate in it. But to turn to a better theme, do you realize that there is barely a month more this term, and I am already beginning to look forward to the end of it? That, I think, is one of the really priceless pleasures of youth. This joy of homecoming, the gradual approach to the familiar surroundings, etc. As an old friend of ours once said on another subject, it can't be beat. Which reminds me, has Arthur got the gramophone mended yet? Your loving son, Jack. Next letter, postmarked the 13th of July, 1914, to his father from Malvern College. My dear Pappy, although there has been no letter this week, I do hope that you have not had a relapse or anything, and that you are getting on all right. This week, we have had a Repton match here, and other things which must now be told. A nice impression, truly, these people will take back of Malvern and the Malvernians. One evening during the game called Crockett's, which is a kind of impromptu cricket played with softballs on the stretch of gravel outside SH, two real nuts, KNUTS, from Repton strolled up and began watching at a distance. This is what they saw. Browning, whose ball had been hit over into Mr. Preston's garden, turned round to an inoffensive person called Hamley, who has just been made a prefect and demanded the latter's ball. This request was very naturally refused, whereupon our friend Browning proceeds to take it by force, and with many blows and oaths, succeeded in ejecting the other down the bank. Then, noticing the not unnatural mirth of the Reptonians at the sight of two public school prefects fighting and rolling in the mud like street boys, he turned round and told them in terms which I cannot reproduce not to grin at him, with a great emphasis on the last word. This Hamley person is down here in the footnotes as Cedric Edwin Hamley, born 1899, died 1997, was an exact contemporary of Jack Lewis in Schoolhouse, having arrived in the third term of 1913. He left in 1915 and served in the war with the London Rifle Brigade. He was afterwards a second lieutenant in the RAF and a captain in the 3rd London Fusiliers from 1922 to 1928. He worked in the family business, C. Hamley Limited, in London. So this is our public school dignity, politeness, and hospitality, which we are always hearing about. These are the institutions that all other civilized countries envy us for and would imitate if they could. Bah! I, for one, will be glad to be rid of them all, and would like to see the day when they are abolished. But as for this Browning, perhaps we judged him too harshly. It is very true that we never know the data for any case but our own. I hear he is not happy at home, so that, although it may be that he is such a beast that he cannot be well treated, yet on the other hand, it may be that he has been made into a beast. One never knows. Last week we had an essay on the difference between genius and talent, and mine has been sent up for good, the ceremony which I told you of. Only 3 weeks more now. Your loving son, Jax. Yeah, there was a footnote here, but I don't think it's very relevant. All right, our editor, Walter Hooper, goes on to say that on Saturday, September 19th, 1914, C.S. Lewis arrived at Great Bookham to meet at the station by the man he'd heard about all his life, W.T. Kirkpatrick. Lewis later wrote in Surprised by Joy, Chapter 9, quote, I came prepared to endure a perpetual lukewarm shower bath of sentimentality. That was the price I was ready to pay for the infinite blessedness of escaping school. One story of my father's in particular gave me the most embarrassing forebodings. He had loved to tell how once at Lurgan, this is a school his father attended where Kirkpatrick was the headmaster at the time, At Lurgan, when he was in some kind of trouble or difficulty, the Old Knock, or the dear Old Knock, W.T. Kirkpatrick's nickname, had drawn him aside and there, quietly and naturally, slid his arm around him and rubbed his dear old whiskers against my father's youthful cheek and whispered a few words of comfort. And here was Bookham at last, and there the arch sentimentalist himself, waiting to meet me. He was over 6 feet tall, very shabbily dressed, lean as a rake, and immensely muscular. His wrinkling face seemed to consist entirely of muscles, so far as it was visible, for he wore mustache and side whiskers with a clean-shaven chin like Emperor Franz Joseph. The whiskers, you will understand, concerned me very much at that moment. My cheek tingled with anticipation. Apparently, however, the old man was holding his fire. We shook hands, though his grip was like iron pincers. It was not lingering. A few minutes later, we were walking away from the station. "You are now," said Kirk, proceeding along the principal artery between Great and Little Bookham. I stole a glance at him. Was this geographical exordium a heavy joke, or was he trying to conceal his emotions? His face, however, showed only an inflexible gravity. I began to make conversation in the deplorable manner which I had acquired at those evening parties and indeed found increasingly necessary to use with my father. I said I was surprised at the scenery of Surrey. It was much wilder than I had expected. "Stop!" shouted Kirk with a suddenness that made me jump. "What do you mean by wilderness? And what grounds had you for not expecting it?" I replied, "I don't know what," still making conversation. As answer after answer was torn to shreds, it at last dawned upon me that he really wanted to know. He was not making conversation, nor joking, nor snubbing me. He wanted to know. I was stung into attempting a real answer. A few passes sufficed to show that I had no clear and distinct idea corresponding to the word wildness, and that insofar as I had any idea at all, wildness was a singularly inept word. "Do you not see, then," concluded the great Knock, "that your remark was meaningless?" By this time, our acquaintance had lasted about 3.5 minutes, but the tone set by this first conversation was preserved without a single break during all the years I spent at Bookham. If ever a man came near to being a purely logical entity, that man was Kirk. Some boys would not have liked it. To me, it was red beef and strong beer. The next letter to his father from Gaston's Great Bookham, Surrey, September 21st, 1914. My dear Pappy, I arrived, as you heard by the telegram, at Great Bookham in perfect safety and with all my effects. Today is Monday, and you must excuse my not writing yesterday, as some friends of mine hosts called in the afternoon when I had intended to write. Need I say how thoroughly satisfied I am with Bookham, Gaston's, and their inhabitants? You already know all about Kirk, more than I do probably, and W has spoken of Mrs. K, whom I liked exceedingly. The country is absolutely glorious. I took my first tour of exploration this afternoon and went through the outskirts of a large forest. One was strongly reminded of As You Like It, William Shakespeare's As You Like It. The village is one such as I have often read about, but never before seen. The little row of red-roofed cottages, the old inn, the church dating from the Conquest might all have stepped out of The Vicar of Wakefield. This is Oliver Goldsmith's The Vicar of Wakefield, 1766, that he's referencing. How Arthur would enjoy this place. Arthur's his childhood friend. Another point of gratification is that I have at last triumphantly found a dirtier railway than the County Down. I wonder, have you any shares in the London and S. Western? Kirk's son, who is a volunteer camp who is in a volunteer camp near here, called for an hour or so last night. His son is George Lewis Kirkpatrick, lived 1882 to 1943. He was their only child of W.T. Kirkpatrick and his wife, Mrs. Kirkpatrick. He was born on the 23rd of May, 1882, when his father was still headmaster of Lurgan College, and he was educated in England at Charterhouse from 1896 to 99. From there, he went to work for the electrical engineers, Browett, Lindley and Company, English makers of Patricroft, Manchester. When Mr. Kirkpatrick retired from Lurgan, he and Mrs. Kirkpatrick moved to Manchester to be near their son. Now Lewis was in a camp near Great Bookham. He was general manager of Bruce Peebles and Company, engineers, in Edinburgh from 1932 until his death in 1943. He came to visit. He came here and called for an hour or so last night. We get the Whig here, which gives a touch of home. I hope you are keeping in good health and spirits and letting Tim sleep indoors. Of course, there are sewing meetings and all the usual war cadata at Bookham. To finish up, it is a brilliant success. Your loving son, Jack. P.S. Any signs of the photos? This letter to Arthur Greaves, the friend mentioned in the last letter, or in the last two letters, actually. From Gaston's, Great Bookham, Surrey. Saturday, September 14th, postmarked the 26th of September, 1914. I'm not really sure why the difference on the dates there. My dear Arthur, if it were not that you could answer me with my own argument, I should upbraid you with not having written me. Sorry, I'm going to start this letter again in just a second. I need to change from the song that is celebrating C.S. Lewis's arrival at his tutor's door, so to speak, and change into a more atmospheric song that represents both Arthur Greaves and C.S. Lewis's love of Norse myth. So that can be our background music here. My dear Arthur, if it were not that you could answer me with my own argument, I should upbraid you with not having written to me. See to it that you do so, that you do as soon as you have read this. And now, what do I think of it? After a week's trial, I have come to the conclusion that I am going to have the time of my life, nevertheless much as I am enjoying the new arrangement. I feel sure that you would appreciate it even more than I. As for the country, I can hardly describe it. The wide expanse of rolling hill and dale, all thickly wooded with hazel and pine, so different from our bare and balder hills in County Down. This place is called Surrey. It is to me a great delight. Seen at present in all the glory of a fine autumn, it may be better imagined than described. How I wish that I could paint. Then I could carry home a few experiences on paper for my own remembrance and your information. I remember a section in C.S. Lewis's Great Divorce where he talks about a painter that's there on the plains of heaven and talking about that's why he's there. He wants to be able to paint the place. So this section just reminded me of that, if you're familiar with that story. We'll get to the Great Divorce eventually. By the time I'm 80 years old, I'm sure, but I'll work through it on this project. Let's see. And I could carry home a few experiences on paper for my own remembrance and your information. But the village would... Oh, okay. Just really quickly. In the Great Divorce, the painter that's there is being kind of counseled or mentored by the mentors who come down from deep heaven to kind of welcome the spirits who've made their way up from purgatory. And they're talking about this idea of painting, which the artist holds. And it's my theory that many of the ghosts that show up in the Great Divorce are things that Lewis has struggled with his entire life, and he represents them as like different people. And so this is a little bit of evidence, I think, for my theory, because when the ghost is being talked to about, oh, that's why I want to come to heaven. There are going to be great things that I can see there that I haven't seen before, that I can paint and that I can like take back with me. And the counsel that the ghost is given is that that's not the purpose. The purpose is here for you to enjoy it, to take it in, for it to be what it actually is. It's not to be represented. It's not to be taken back. It's to be fully, experienced finally for the first time. These great true things for what they are. Back to his letter. Can't find my spot. Here we go. Where does he say painting? I wish that I could paint. Then I could carry home a few experiences on paper for my own remembrance and your information. But the village would please you even better. I have never seen anything like it outside a book. There is a quaint old inn that might have stepped out of the Vicar of Wakefield, and a church that dates from before the conquest. But it is no good enumerating things. I cannot convey the impression of perfect restfulness that this place imparts. We have all often read of places that time has forgotten. Quote, well, Great Bookham is one of these. I have only just discovered that you put my name in that book. Arthur had given him H.G. Wells's The Country of the Blind and Other Stories, published 1911. I have only just discovered that you put my name in that book. If I had seen it earlier, I should have sent it back. You have no right to be so foolishly generous. However, many, many thanks. When one has set aside the rubbish that H.G. Wells always puts in, there remains a great deal of original, thoughtful, and suggestive work in it. The, quote, door in the wall, for instance, moved me in a way I can hardly describe. How true it all is. The seeing one walks out into joy and happiness unthinkable, where the dull, senseless eyes of the world see only destruction and death. The Plattner story and Under the Knife are the next best. They have given me a great deal of pleasure. I am now engaged in reading Sense and Sensibility. It is undoubtedly one of her best. Do you remember the Palmer family? This is in Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, published 1811, that he's referencing. In Greek, I have started to read Homer's Iliad. Homer, the Greek poet, generally believed to have lived in about the 8th century BC, is famous for his two epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Mr. Kirkpatrick wasted no time preparing Lewis to undertake these Greek masterpieces. We opened our books. He's writing in Surprised by Joy here. We opened our books at Iliad Book 1, Lewis wrote in Chapter 9. Without a word of introduction, Knock read aloud the first 20 lines or so in the new pronunciation, which I had never heard before. He then translated, with a very few explanations, about 100 lines. I had never seen a classical author taken in such large gulps before. When he had finished, he handed me over Crusius's lexicon, and having told me to go through again as much as I could of what he had done, left the room. It seems an odd method of teaching, but it worked. At first, I could travel only a very short way along the trail he had blazed, but every day I could travel further. I was beginning to think in Greek. That is the great Rubicon to cross in learning any language. Lewis was using Gottlieb, Christian Crusius, a complete Greek and English lexicon for the poems of Homer and Homeridae, illustrating the domestic, religious, political, and military condition of the heroic age and explaining the most difficult passages. My goodness, what a long title. Translated with corrections and additions by Henry Smith. New edition revised and edited by Thomas Kerchever Arnold. 1862 was the publication date. Let's see. Started reading Homer's Iliad, of which, of course, you must often have heard. Although you don't know Greek and don't care for poetry, I cannot resist the temptation of telling you how stirring it is. Those fine, simple, euphonious lines, as they roll on with a roar like that of the ocean, strike a chord in one's mind that no modern literature approaches. Better or worse it may be, but different It is, for certain. I hope everything went off successfully on the eventful Tuesday, and also that you are now recovered from your cold. You know my address. You have no excuse for silence, sir. No Phillips concerts this year at Belfast. No Phillips concert this year at Belfast. Can I pronounce these words right? And read the sentence correctly. Let me try that a third time. Take 3. No Phillips concerts this year at Belfast, I am told. Yours, expecting a letter, C.S. Lewis. The next letter is to his father, postmarked the 30th of September, 1914, from the Kirkpatricks. My dear Pappy, thanks very much for the 2 letters which I received, all in due course. Yes, I think that will be the best plan about the photos. Only please send me 2 copies, as I want to give one to someone else at Malvern. I am now at the end of my first week at Bookham, and I can again tell you it is everything that can possibly be desired. Okay, he's talking about how much he loves it there. I'm going to play another version of him loving his time at his tutor's place. I'll just let it play in the background. I'll play this in the outro so you can hear the whole thing if you're like super interested. All right. I am now at the end of my first week at Bookham and can again tell you that it is everything that can possibly be desired, both in work and leisure. It is, of course, incomparably beyond any of the arrangements we have tried yet. This weekend, an old pupil and friend of Kirk's was staying with us, one Oswald Smythe, who hies from Bembridge and is about 25 years of age. Do you know who that would be? We are going on with friend Homer at what, to my ex-Malvernian mind, is a prodigious rate. Let me try this again. Do you know who that would be? We are going on with friend Homer at what, to my ex-Malvernian mind, is a prodigious rate. That is to say, we have polished off a book in the first week. At Malvern, we always took a term to read a book of that sort of stuff. Today, I did a thing that would have gladdened your heart. Walked to Leatherhead, for Bookham does not boast a barber, to get my hair cut, and am now looking like a convict. Yes, thanks. I have plenty of underclothing, and the cold is a good deal better. There is a good deal of war fever raging here, as is natural. I am glad to hear that those 5 righteous have been found, but 5,000 more would be more to the point. What is all the local news? Tell Arthur the next time you see him that I am eagerly expecting a reply to my letter. You think? I think Arthur knows that if he's read it. I suppose the winter has closed in at home by this time. But we are still having quite summer weather here, which I rather resent. Mrs. Kirk plays the piano beautifully, which is one of the great assets of Bookham. There is also a moment on foot to make me learn to play bridge, but I am wriggling as hard as is compatible with manners. Your loving son, Jack. P.S. Who is Mr. Dodds that Kirk mentions? The footnote here says Eric Robertson Dodds lived 1893 to 1979, was a classical scholar from Bainbridge, County Down. He was educated at Campbell College and University College, Oxford. At this time, he was reading Literae Humaniores at University College. He took his BA in 1917. Dodds was lecturer in classics at University College, Reading, from 1919 to 24. Professor of Greek at the University of Birmingham from 1924 to 36, and Regius Professor of Greek in the University of Oxford from 1936 to 1960. You can see his autobiography, Missing Persons, published 1977. This is some context from Walter Hooper, the editor of these letters. War had been building up for some time, and it was now imminent. The heir to the Habsburg Empire, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, was assassinated in Sarajevo on the 28th of June, 1914, linking the assassination to the government of Belgrade. On the 23rd of July, Austria dispatched to Serbia an ultimatum which could only be answered in two ways. Serbia must become, for all practical purposes, a conquered province of the Austrian Empire, or it must accept a declaration of war. On the 28th of July, Austria declared war on Serbia, and on the 29th of July, Russia mobilized her southwestern army. That same day in London, Winston Churchill proposed to the British cabinet that the European sovereigns should, quote, be brought together for the sake of peace, end quote. This is from Martin Gilbert's book, First World War, published 1994, page 25. That quote, or that reference. Germany refused, and on the 31st of July, Russia mobilized against Germany. That same day, Britain asked France and Germany to respect Belgian neutrality, to the maintenance of which Britain was committed by a treaty signed in 1839. France agreed to do so, but Germany gave no answer. Then on the 3rd of August, Germany declared war on France. Hitherto, Britain had stood aside, but the question of Belgian neutrality raised a problem. And on the 3rd of August, Britain set an ultimatum to Berlin, demanding there be no attack on Belgium. On the 4th of August, Germany entered Belgium, and that night, Britain declared war on Germany. By midnight on the 4th of August, 5 empires were at war. This was Lewis's reference in the earlier letter. There's a good deal of war fever raging here, as is natural. I am glad to hear that those 5 righteous have been found, but 5,000 would be more to the point. Let's see. The righteous 5 he's referring to. By midnight on August 4th, 5 empires were at war. And Lewis's letter was later in September, on September 30th. The 5 empires were the Austro-Hungarian Empire against Serbia, the German Empire against France, Britain, and Russia, the Russian Empire against Germany and Austria-Hungary, and the British and French empires against Germany. Because of wartime needs, Warney's training had been accelerated. Warney is C.S. Lewis's older brother, had been accelerated from 2 years to only 9 months. On October 1st, he was commissioned a second lieutenant in the Army Service Corps and sent to the base at Aldershot in preparation for being sent to France on the 4th of November. Next letter to his father, dated sometime in October 1914. Again, written from where he's now under the tutelage of W.T. Kirkpatrick. My dear Pappy, thanks very much for the photographs, which I have duly received and studied. They are artistically got up and touched in. In fact, everything that could be desired. Only, do I really tie my tie like that? Do I really brush my hair like that? Am I really as fat as that? Do I really look so sleepy? I think many of us, if not all of us, ask these questions when we see pictures of ourselves. However, I suppose that thing in the photo is one thing I am saddled with forever and ever. So I had better learn to like it. Isn't it curious that we know anyone else better than we do ourselves? Possibly a merciful delusion. You ask about our church at Bookham. Here in the footnote, their church is St. Nicholas Church, the earliest parts of which were built in the 11th century. It's mentioned in the Domesday book. The Reverend George, is it Domesday or Domesday? Probably Domesday. The Domesday book. The Reverend George Shepherd Bird was rector from 1905 to 1926. Jane Austen went to St. Nicholas often when her godfather was the vicar there. Interesting. So you asked about our church at Bookham. Well, I thought I had mentioned it in my first description of the village. However, at the risk of repetition, you shall be informed. It is of pre-Norman structure. and is, like all these old churches, no particular shape. There are various plates of bronze dedicated by so-and-so gentleman to his beloved lady, who, etc., etc. The organ is out of tune. The singing, execrable. I need to look up that word. All right, I'm going to look it up right now. Who cares? Execrable. Extremely bad or unpleasant. Well, I probably could have picked that up from context. I don't know if this audio comes through. If you can hear it, it's pronounced execrable by somebody who strangely sounds a lot like my voice. Execrable is how you pronounce it. The organ is out of tune. The singing, execrable. The vicar is hard-working, sincere, and a cheerful fellow. But as Miss Austen would say, of, quote, no parts. It is, in its own way, very beautiful. Yes, I go every Sunday. Man, it's always hard for me to find where I left off when I turn my finger or my eyes from the page. I need to leave my finger where it is. Yes, I go every Sunday. I wonder, did you notice the article on Nietzsche in last Sunday's Times Literary Supplement? This is the Nietzschean Way from the Times Literary Supplement, the 1st of October, 1914, page 442, if you want to go look that up. I wonder, did you notice that article? Which demonstrates that although we have been told to regard Nietzsche as the indirect author of this war, nothing could be farther removed from the spirit and letter of his teaching. It just shows how we can be duped by an ignorant and loudmouthed, cheap press. Seems like these things that we think we're dealing with that are brand new have perhaps been going on for a while. It just shows how we can be duped by an ignorant and loudmouthed cheap press. Kirk, who knows something about N, had anticipated that article with us and is in high glee at seeing the blunder, quote, proclaimed on the housetops. I am very glad to hear that Warney has at last safely arrived in that state of bliss, our British Army. What happens to him now, do you know? The weather here is perfectly ideal. Sharp frosts at night, and clear, mild sunshine in the day. This is really the nicest country I have ever seen outside. Of course, County Down. The places about here in the woods are alive with pheasants, as the usual shots are at the front. They are so tame that you can come within a few paces of them. On Saturday, the household went over to the famous Box Hill, which, however, I thought not nearly so pretty as some of the places nearer Gaston's. I can still say that a larger knowledge of our new stunt gives nothing but deeper satisfaction. We have at last struck the real thing in education, in comfort, in pleasure, and in companions. I could almost believe that Malvern had never existed, or was merely a nightmare which I am glad to forget. Paper and time at an end, your loving son, Jack, and the same is true for me in this video, so I hope you enjoyed something in it. I did. Thank you. And until next time, when we read on C.S. Lewis, take care of yourself.
I knocked on the door so wide, in a suit standing tall with pride, here to learn and here to grow, in the light of his knowledge's glow. Stories that I heard so clear lived in my mind year after year. W.T. Kirkpatrick, here I stand, ready now to shake his hand.